Welcome to UK Voices 22. The moment the camera cut back to a visibly stunned Dan Wootton, a single phrase hung in the air. A verbal grenade that had just detonated a carefully constructed facade. "It's all trash," the guest had declared, a brutal and unvarnished assessment of Meghan Markle's much-hyped podcast. And in that instant, a quiet studio segment transformed into a public reckoning, a moment that would ignite a firestorm and expose the fragile reality behind the Duchess of Sussex's carefully curated public persona. What followed was not just a scathing review, but a chain reaction of rage and denial from within the Sussex camp, a panicked scramble to contain the fallout from a truth they could no longer bury. This isn't about a simple opinion, this is about the deliberate dismantling of a brand, a reality check delivered so brutally that it sent shockwaves through the very foundations of Meghan's Hollywood ambitions. The question isn't whether she heard it, it's what happened immediately after. And the answer, as we've learned, reveals a level of fury and a series of desperate maneuvers that go far beyond a simple disagreement. The trash comment, as it turns out, was far from a spontaneous outburst. It was the culmination of a growing consensus among media insiders and a public weary of what they perceived as the Sussexes' relentless campaign of grievances. The podcast, touted as a platform for empowering women, had instead become a narcissistic echo chamber. Episode after episode, it was less about the archetypes of womanhood and more about the archetype of Meghan Markle herself, her victimhood, her struggles, her thinly veiled swipes at the royal family. This pattern, as our sources reveal, was the very core of the problem. One producer, who wished to remain anonymous, described the production process as an ego trip. Meghan would come in with a script, and the conversations were anything but organic, they said. The guests were there to validate her experiences, not to have a genuine dialogue. If a guest veered off message, the audio was re-spliced. It wasn't a podcast. It was an infomercial for her personal brand. This deliberate manipulation of content, a far cry from the candid conversations she promised, is what led to the all-trash verdict. It wasn't just a critique of the show's content, but a moral condemnation of its disingenuous nature. The raging response from Meghan, however, was the most telling part of the story. Our insider sources paint a picture of a phone call that erupted into a tirade. The moment she was informed of the on-air takedown, Meghan reportedly demanded to know who had leaked the details of the podcast's production, convinced that someone was trying to sabotage her. The focus was not on the criticism itself, but on the perceived betrayal. This paranoid reaction, we're told, is a pattern of behavior that has soured relationships and created an atmosphere of fear among her staff. The idea that someone would dare to challenge her narrative, and do so publicly, was a transgression of the highest order. This isn't the first time Meghan has faced such scrutiny. Her previous projects have been met with a similar mix of hype and underperformance. But this time, the public nature of the attack, delivered live on a show known for its no-holds-barred commentary, was a direct hit. It bypassed the carefully controlled channels of communication and went straight to the heart of her public image. The damage wasn't just to her podcast, it was to the very idea of her as a credible, relatable figure. The loops that were opened, the empowering conversations, the authentic moments, were suddenly revealed as carefully staged performances. And as the curiosity of the public was piqued, they began to ask a new question: if the podcast was a lie, what else is? The fallout has been swift and brutal. We've learned that a major brand partnership, one that was reportedly in the final stages of negotiation, has been put on indefinite hold, as the company reassesses its association with the now tarnished image of the Duchess. The public's perception, once swayed by the narrative of a wronged princess, is shifting. The story of a victim has been replaced with the image of a woman whose carefully curated world is collapsing under the weight of its own inauthenticity. The closing of this initial loop, the truth about the podcast, is not an end, but the beginning of a new, and far more damaging, chapter for the Sussexes. The promise made in the beginning, the unraveling of Meghan's fury and the exposure of the truth, has been delivered. But the story doesn't end there. The rage from Meghan was not simply a momentary outburst, it was a symptom of a deeper crisis. The podcast, once a cornerstone of her brand, has been quietly removed from top promotional spots, and according to our sources, is now being viewed as a liability. The celebrity guests, who once clamored to be on the show, are now reportedly reconsidering their public association with the project, fearing they'll be caught in the crossfire of a public relations disaster. The conversion, as we promised, is this. The public is no longer just hearing about a spat between two media personalities. They are witnessing the implosion of a meticulously crafted media empire built on a foundation of grievances and manufactured authenticity. The raging phone call was not just a reaction to one man's words, but a panicked lashing out at the reality that her narrative is no longer holding up. The curiosity loops we opened, the behind-the-scenes manipulation, the strained relationships, the lost deals, all point to the same inescapable conclusion. The brutal, all-trash review was not an attack on an individual, but a piercing of the narrative bubble that has shielded the Sussexes from genuine accountability. And as that bubble bursts, the true, and far more controversial, picture of the Duchess and her ambitions is finally coming into focus. The journey of the video is complete, but the journey of the Sussex brand is just beginning its descent.